generic video making.
put me in a live shot at 508 from here.
election ahead of us, as everyone in this room is well aware. If I can, I do want to just take a sec because we've got a couple other folks running for office in this room as well that I want to point out. So we've got Jamie Wall running for state senate. She's very involved. And I'm not sure if any of our other folks have arrived, but when they get here, we'll have a roar and you'll know who they're talking. I'm also running for state assembly. Oh my gosh, we're in some crazy times, y'all, right? We need to get people out to the polls, excited about this election. We are so lucky that in that regard, people do get excited about Tammy Baldwin. She is, she's beloved on both sides. And that kind of energy and it just helps people want to get to the polls. Maybe they're not excited about some other fixes, but I am very happy to introduce Tammy Baldwin. Thank you so much for being here and look forward to hearing your words of wisdom.
Thank you, Christy, for your incredible leadership. And I want to underscore what you said. You're also running for office. And what I have seen, last time I was with the Brown County Democrats, you invited anybody thinking about running for office to stand up. And we had just gotten the new fair maps. And oh my God, there were like 20 people who stood up and said, I'm thinking about this assembly seat, I'm thinking about this state senate seat, thinking about for Congress. Thankfully, no one said they were going to challenge me as a Democrat. I was grateful for that. But I do want to actually say something about those new fair maps, because I think this is one of those elections where we have the potential to have things bubble up from the ground up. When you have a gerrymandered map, people just give a pass on the opportunity to serve and run for office. They look at a deep red district and say, I don't even have a shot at this, I'm not going to even try. And with fair maps, we have contested races for almost all the state assembly seats and all of the state senate seats that are up this year. That's amazing. That's really amazing. So thank you to the candidates who have chosen to do that. And how do you win elections at the local level? You do doors. It can be grueling work. Sometimes it's a lot of fun, right, Jamie? You said it was fun. All right. But we're knocking on doors that no one's knocked on for 14 years of gerrymandered maps in some parts of the state. And you're talking to people who may share interests, running on health care, running to fix the damn roads, running, and that's going to engage people. And so I'm really, really excited about what these fair maps mean for November in Wisconsin. But I also want to remind everyone about something you need no reminder of, which is we are the battleground state in the country. We could decide who becomes the next president. We could decide which party controls the United States Senate. We could decide which party controls the House of Representatives. All of that could happen here in the state of Wisconsin. And that hasn't escaped the attention of national Republicans. You may have noticed that in just a couple of weeks, they're going to host their national convention here in Wisconsin in Milwaukee. That's not a coincidence. They didn't just look at a big map and say, oh, let's go here. They are doing it because they want to shine a spotlight on Wisconsin and what a battleground state we have. And I also want to suggest that they went to great lengths and great distances to recruit my opponent. You're supposed to giggle at that at least. I'll explain further if you need. So, like they have done in Pennsylvania and Montana and a couple of other states, they've recruited multi-millionaires who might have not the most recent attachment to the state in which they're running. So my opponent, Eric Hovde, is bankrolling his own campaign. He owns a $3 billion bank in California and has a lovely $7 million home in Laguna Beach. And he earned the local newspaper's most influential of Orange County 3 years in a row. We don't have an Orange County. We have a Green County. We don't have an Orange County. We have a Brown County. We don't have an Orange County. So that suggests at least a certain amount of time spent in another state. But all of that aside, I don't think they recruited him just because we're a battleground state. Which leads to a few stories I want to tell you. I think they recruited him the most, their pick, because they see how effective I've been, even in these troubled times, even in these deeply divided times. Because I've never been afraid to take on the big battles, to stand up to powerful interests. And you know what? Sometimes we win. And those are some of the stories that I want to tell you, give you hope, and make sure you understand how important it is that we all participate. Well, let me start by just sharing a little bit about my background and where I got the fire in the belly to run for office. I was born in Madison, Wisconsin. My mother was 19 years old and going through a divorce when I was born. And throughout her life, my mother struggled with mental illness and physical illness. She moved back in with her parents, my grandparents, and they raised me. And I was so fortunate to have them, their stability and their love. I watched my mother struggle in a healthcare system that didn't recognize that we should treat mental illness on parity with physical illness. We hadn't even talked about parity laws back then, but I watched her struggles. And when I was 9, I got sick. I had a serious childhood illness that landed me in the hospital for 3 months. I had something very similar to spinal meningitis. That was not the exact diagnosis, but that's what I had. And my grandparents had health insurance, but when they saw the fine print, it didn't cover grandchildren. I wasn't a legal dependent. And so they did what responsible parents or grandparents would do. Let's get her health care. And they looked in the individual market. And back then, the big health insurance companies had no legal obligation to cover somebody with a pre-existing condition. And you know what they didn't back then? People with diabetes, people with heart conditions, people who were battling cancer, and children like me with a pre-existing health condition, they just said no. And so between my mother's struggles and my grandparents' worries and my own experience in the healthcare system, I just believed that it was screwed up, right? And when I got old enough, I wanted to be able to work to change that. That was the fire in the belly. I'm not going to go through the battles that I had at the local level and state level. But when I was in the House of Representatives, I was on a health panel that wrote the Affordable Care Act. And one of the things, yes, and one of the things from my own personal experience that was so important to me was to make sure we wrote a provision that told the big insurance companies that you can't cherry pick anymore. You can't just insure healthy people. The idea of insurance is we all pitch in against the risk that any one of us should get sick. And we wrote that provision, and big insurance companies and the small insurance companies can no longer discriminate against people. They have to be able to offer coverage. They can't even discriminate with regard to premiums. Now, I'm going to brag. It was my amendment to the Affordable Care Act that allows young people to stay on their parents' health insurance until they turn 26. I love going to college campuses and saying, raise your hand if you're on your parents' health insurance, and see almost all the hands go up. Before that provision, most young people lacked health insurance. If you graduate from high school, your first job is not going to offer health insurance. If you're in college, part-time or full-time, sometimes it's very shabby insurance. This is a game changer for so many. Now, I want to point out that my opponent, Aaron Tufte, would like to see the Affordable Care Act repealed. I thought we'd already gone through all that under Trump and when John McCain became that last vote necessary to keep the Affordable Care Act. But he's still chomping at the bit to overturn, to repeal the Affordable Care Act. He says in particular that he thinks insurance companies should charge higher premiums for people who are overweight or people who make choices that he disagrees with. Just this past week, he was caught on audio tape saying that he opposed my provision to allow young people to stay on their parents' health insurance. I believe his quote was, "They should just grow up." This, affects their maturity to be able to stay on their parents' health insurance. Couldn't be a larger contrast. But I tell you that story to tell you that you can stand up to big, powerful interests and win. Now, right. I can't just brag about a victory that was 14 years ago. We've had some recent victories in the healthcare arena. We stood up to Big Pharma that has resisted for decades the idea that Medicare, on behalf of its over 40 million beneficiaries, negotiate for lower prices. We're doing that now because the Inflation Reduction Act. We made sure now that in Medicare vaccines are free and that insulin is no more than $35 a month out of pocket. And I feel hopeful that maybe before the end of the year we'll make that $35 limit for everybody who has that. I also want to tell you about an even more recent victory which did not even require passing a law. In Wisconsin, about 500,000 people have asthma and more have COPD. And all of those individuals require asthma inhalers in order to breathe. Most have to have a daily inhaler, but then for emergencies, there's emergency inhalers. The companies that make them set the list price. And in America, the list price for an inhaler is somewhere between $200 and $650. If you have insurance, of course, it defrays part of it. There's other, if you're on Medicare, Medicaid. If you have no insurance, you have to look for coupons and discounts and the constant worry, will I be able to afford my next inhaler? In Europe, the same inhalers available for between $5 and $75. Outrageous. So a couple members of the Senate Health Panel on which I sit and I launched an investigation into the 4 manufacturers of inhalers. And we basically asked 2 questions. One, why do you charge Americans so much more than you charge people in Europe or other places in the world? And secondly, why are there only 4 of you? Inhalers have been around since the 1950s. There should be, their patents should have run out. There should be generic competition. And there's not much. So anyways, we launched this investigation in January of this year. And by March, 3 out of the 4 inhaler companies voluntarily agreed that no one of their customers would pay more than $35 per month out of pocket for their inhalers. And 2 of them started their programs on June 1st. And so far, what we can tell is they're sticking to it. Now, we didn't pass a law, so we're going to have to be very vigilant. And the 4th company wouldn't agree to any changes, although we're still working on them. But it shows you can stand up to powerful interests and shine a spotlight, transparency, scrutiny, and get change. I want to pivot to another issue. Wisconsin is a state that makes things. We're a big manufacturing state. And I'm always proud of those iconic products that we make. We think of beer brats. Hey, speaking of beer, I understand this is reserved for me. So I'm going to take a sip. I hear it's Door County cherry beer. That's my next destination, by the way. So, very nice. But we're known for motorcycles, we're known for sinks and toilets and faucets, we're known for all of these iconic products that we make in Wisconsin. Ooh. Paper, #1 paper making state in the country. That's right. But anyways, we've seen a lot of those mills close. We've seen a lot of those factories leave over decades of poor industrial policy and poor trade policy. But I consider myself the champion in the United States Senate of Buy America policy, Buy America rules. So what does that mean? It's not about telling the private sector what to do. It's just saying that if we are spending our taxpayer dollars, whenever possible, let's let them support U.S. workers and U.S. small businesses. Let's not send them overseas, right? We don't try to change that. And when under the Trump administration, you got so much resistance, I sometimes was able to pass a 1-year Buy America rule or a 5-year Buy America rule. But in the Biden administration, I've been able to get permanent Buy America rules in the infrastructure bill, in the Chips and Science Act, and in the Inflation Reduction Act. I mean, in the Inflation Reduction Act with all the clean energy, we should lead the clean energy revolution in the United States, not follow behind others. It's bringing jobs to Wisconsin. We now have 2 companies making electric vehicle chargers. We now have a company in the southeast part of the state, in Kenosha County, that is adding 200 jobs to build out circuitry that is necessary for the broadband build-up promised in the Inflation Reduction Act. And that story is interesting. Secretary Raimondo, our Commerce Secretary, needed the circuitry to complete this build-out that we're doing over many years, but we want to get every residence and every business access to high-speed internet. So she went overseas and talked to the CEO of a company that makes this circuitry. And she said, I need this for the build-out, but I can't buy yours. Well, why not? Because you don't make it in America. Yeah, that's not our business model. Well, if you want me to buy the product, you're going to have to figure out a way. And they found a company called Sanmina in Kenosha County, and they're adding 200 employees. They're doubling their footprint, and they're going to make the circuitry that we need for the nationwide broadband build-out. That is because of Buy America policy. So I haven't told you who the villain is on all of this. Like, who'd be against this? It just seems like a no-brainer, right? Big multinational corporations have a choice about where they make their products, their widgets, let's say. And if you want to make something for the cheapest amount, you go to a place with no minimum wage laws, no worker safety laws, no environmental rules that control emissions. You go to places, and it's hard to think we can say this in this day and age, with forced labor or child labor, or places where the government subsidizes the enterprise purposely to undercut our businesses in the United States. That happened. And so we stood up to the big multinationals who lobbied furiously against Buy America policies, and we won. And it means jobs for Wisconsin. The last story that I want to share is about standing up to another powerful interest, a little more amorphous. I call the extremists. The folks who have plotted for years and years about how to take away rights and freedoms. Focused on Roe, they worked for decades in state legislatures, at the federal level, in courts, and they finally got what they were working for, the overturning of Roe v. Wade. But we also see these folks in other arenas. You heard about the folks who are trying to rewrite history for our children's curriculum, maybe leave out a few more than details. The people who are talking about banning books. This is who we're up against at all levels. When the Dobbs decision came out 2 years ago, giving half of America fewer rights than their mothers and grandmothers had, I read the opinion. I'm an attorney. I felt compelled. How did they reach this conclusion? They basically said, in the majority opinion, Roe was wrongly decided back in 1973. They said that it was based on a right to privacy, but the word privacy does not appear in the U.S. Constitution. So, of course, there could be no right to privacy. And I thought back to my law school days. I read several cases that were decided based on a right to privacy. The contraception cases, 1965, Griswold versus Connecticut, based on a right to privacy. I mean, do you know before that date that there were states that required you to be married and maybe even show that your husband gave permission to buy contraceptions? In many states, it wasn't even available at all. Interracial marriage was based on a right to privacy when the court struck down a criminal statute banning interracial marriage in Virginia. Same-sex marriage based on a right to privacy, much more recently decided in the Obergefell decision in 2015. And as we've seen, it was clear from that court opinion that they were not stopping at overturning Roe. And if it weren't enough that the majority said we're not stopping there, Clarence Thomas wrote his own opinion. And in it, he called out the contraception case, the Lawrence decision, and the same-sex marriage case. By the way, he omitted the interracial marriage case. But he literally called them out by name and said, perhaps this Supreme Court should revisit those issues. And that sent shockwaves. What do you mean, no access to contraception? We saw a court overturn in vitro fertilization that helps people start families in Alabama. And people who had fought so long for recognition of their marriages were terrified. And so at that moment, just weeks after the Dobbs decision came down, we introduced a bill called the Respect for Marriage Act. Basically, consider it a bill that if a future Supreme Court were to overturn interracial marriage or same-sex marriage, we would make sure that those marriages had to be respected by the federal government and all 50 states. So we introduced the bill, but you know in the Senate you have to overcome a filibuster with 60 votes in order to pass a law. And so all the journalists who hang around on Capitol Hill coming up to me going, you don't really think you can get 60 votes, do you? And I said, just you watch. And it took weeks and weeks. But I knew Republicans who I thought wanted to get to yes. We had a family member, or in one case, 3 young adult daughters who were just saying every day, Dad, you cannot be on the wrong side of history on this. It would be so embarrassing. And others who just, had staff members or people they went to church with who would be impacted should the court overturn these decisions. And in the end, I was able to persuade 12 Republicans to join all 50 Democrats. We overcame the filibuster and we passed the Respect for Marriage Act into law. Even in these divided, we can stand up to powerful interests and we can win. Now, my opponent has said, on the issue of reproductive choice, I am very proud to be the lead author of a bill called the Women's Health Protection Act. That measure would restore Roe by codifying it at the federal level, but it would take the additional step, which is so necessary, in telling states like Wisconsin and Texas and Florida, and many others, you can't pass laws at the state level that are going to take away those rights and freedoms. I do not yet have 60 votes to overcome a filibuster, but I do have a plan. And that plan involves you helping re-elect me to the United States Senate. And it's interesting, so, my opponent said several years ago that he was 100% opposed to abortion rights. Today, just like Trump, he's kind of back-walking, white sad. And I just listen to what they're saying. Oh, I think the federal government should decide. No, I think the states should decide. Well, I think women should decide. Period. Full stop. So I thank you for being here today. I thank you for your encouragement. Nobody does this alone. Yes, I get the title. Thank you, thank you. But I stand on your shoulders every day. I can't get there without you. So thank you for being here and thank you for your support. Thank you. And cheers. Cheers. Cheers to Tammy. Yes. Cheers. Yes.
Thank you very much.
All right.
Mix them in. So I'll jump in. My son has type 1 diabetes.